As countries develop, Mexico tends to increase our per capita emissions at the same time as we increase our energy intensity, and therefore the proportion of greenhouse gas emissions with respect to gross national products. Mexico shows less energy efficiency than the average of four Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development countries, which means that it generates more greenhouse gas emission per GNP unit than we do. Today, in East Lansing, I organized our group members to talk about the climate change of Mexico.
Climate change brings vulnerabilities and opportunities to Mexico. Poor air quality is one of the vulnerabilities of Mexico. Air pollution is at dangerous level. Nationally, Mexicans are advised to stay indoors and avoid outdoor exercise. Birds are dropped dead in mid-flight and visibility is low. Respiratory problems are rampant due to poor air quality. The poor air quality arouses ecological harms on flying animals. However, Mexican government also makes some efforts socially and economically to reduce air pollution. Factories and gas refineries were relocated. Dirty old buses were replaced by electric metro system and also lean gas plant.
The second vulnerability is animals. Animals like the birds, butterflies, and other mammals are very sensitive to the temperature. The increase in temperature affects the mitigation rate of birds and causes an extinction of animals in Mexico. In the past decades, a large amount of money has been already used to save the endangered animals such as jaguar, monarch, and butterflies. The third vulnerability is agriculture because agriculture is a climate-sensitive sector. Due to greenhouse warming, the high frequency of extreme El Nino events cause low volume of rainfall in the most of the country and high volume of rainfall in the north. High temperature will dry up the farming land and kill the fish. The broken food supply chain will also bring highly economic loss.
Vulnerability, food. Climate change in Mexico brings food become one of the vulnerability. Because of the low rainfall and hot weather, the land in Mexico dries up. It seriously affects the food growth in Mexico. It is hard to grow food in dry lands. Also, the quality of the food goes down. The lack of food makes food become expensive to buy, and the low quality of the food makes people unhealthy to eat.
I'm going to talk about the vulnerabilities of energy in Mexico. While the Mexico exploits the energy, the process of exploitation will emit greenhouse gas and also the black carbon will be increased. Also, the exhausted gas will be greater than before and decrease the air quality in Mexico during the process of exploitation. While the Mexico exploits the new energy, the useless energy may be wasted during the process. Finally, the indigenous people's culture and custom will be lost because of the air quality is going down.
The last vulnerability for Mexico climate change is tourism. Because of the climate change will cause the amount of tourism decrease. The bad environmental condition and the air quality make people not favor to travel to Mexico, which will seriously affect the economy. And also the desertification and the scarcity of water making regions less hospitable for both local communication and tourists. But the climate change not only gives Mexico a lot of vulnerabilities, but also has a lot of opportunities as well. The first opportunity is the government contribution. The Mexico government realized the climate change is a real serious problem, so the government starts to take care and protect the environment. The most important thing is the Mexico government published a lot of environmental protect law and make a proposal for the future. The new climate law set targets for greenhouse gas emission and ramp up clean energy production. By 2015, Mexico expects to curb greenhouse gas emission 50% relative to 2000 level. The government has also pledged to generate 35% of its energy from renewable.
Water forests are shrinking in Mexico. However, one of the opportunities of this situation is that Mexican government is now stepping up work to protect the woods surrounding the cities and is investing new pipes, sewage systems, treatment facilities, rainwater collections, and tree planting. The perspective of Mexico is that solving the water problem that has been insufficient. Ecologically, about 80% of the forest is under legal protection, and CONABIO has designed a priority region for conservation because of importance of water supplies and biodiversities. Economically, building new water treatment system to replace worn-out pipes saves water and also money. Socially, people have less pressure of using water during daily life.
Opportunity, renewables. Mexico promised to reduce emissions by 25%. One of the most effective strategies is developing renewable energies. By using wind, solar, and other renewable sources, reduce the carbon emission. Also, the development of renewables brings more job opportunities to people in Mexico, and people used to live around the factory have a better environment.
Before the Industrial Revolution and global imperialism, Mexico was briefly a monarchy and then a republic. We achieved independence from Spain in 1821, a small group of white, upper-class elites, political and economic control over the millions of poor peasants and indigenous people. After liberal revolutions brought independence from Spain, a white upper class maintained control of society much as it had done under Spanish colonial rule. In the late 1800s, new wealth came into Latin America from increased trade and industrialization, but it was the elites who benefited. During the Industrial Revolution and global imperialism, Mexico's economy underwent rapid but highly unequal growth. The railway system expanded from a single line from Mexico City to the Gulf Coast port of Veracruz to create an entire network of railways that encompassed most regions of Mexico. During World War II, Mexico's inward-looking development strategy produced sustained economic growth of 3 to 4% of modest 3% inflation annually from the 1940s until the 1970s. After the Industrial Revolution and the global imperialism, Mexican economy was progressively undermined by the physical mismanagement and by a poor export industrial sector, and a resulting sharp deterioration of the investment climate. By late 1982, incoming President Lala Madrid reduced public spending drastically, stimulated exports, and forced economic growth to balance the national account.
The fossil fuel is one of the main problems in Mexico. In 1990, the production of fossil fuel in Mexico has been increased obviously, and Mexico began to expand their exploitation of fossil fuels step by step in the later years. Until 20,000 years, Mexico became one of the largest exporting fossil fuel countries in the world. In 2012, Mexico released its national energy strategy, which targets a share of 35% of non-fossil fuels in its energy supply by 2026. Mexico decided to decrease the amount of exploitation locally and increase the amount of importing fossil fuel from the other countries in order to save their environment in Mexico.
Now I'm going to introduce deforestation history in Mexico. Before the Spanish conquest, about 2/3 of the country was forest. Today, less than 1/5 of the country remains verdant, mainly in the south and east. Deforestation remains a large problem because it is often viewed as a sign of progress. It's also a means for the poorest segment of Mexico's rural population to gain unclaimed land. 50% of Mexican farmers now live at subsistence levels, meaning that they simply do not grow enough food to support their families. Data suggests that 80% of all carbon emissions came from deforestation. More recent studies place this figure lower. Certainly, Mexico has taken some steps on forest management. IFID is beginning implementation of a sustainable forest management project. The project will pilot ways for the government and communities to contribute to climate change mitigation through better land and forest use.
Lifestyles. Climate change also affects the lifestyles in Mexico. Women in Mexico have less carbon footprint than men. Because most of the women do not have jobs, they adapt climate change by reducing consumption and put more resources for other family members. Poor people have less carbon footprint. They have lower income. Most of them depend on agriculture and self-sufficient. Government will help them to adapt climate change by reducing the land interest laws. Middle-class people have higher income and carbon footprint. They use high technology like air purifier and water purifier to adapt climate change.
For this class, we will talking about the vulnerability population. The first one is the women, because women usually take care most of the housework. So the women usually face household risk and use more natural resource. And also the woman has a more illness condition because body qualities of born baby. The second one will be the poor people. The climate change usually make droughts or heavy rain that will influence agriculture industrial for food support. The third one is the indigenous people. The climate change will make some bad weather like a heavy wind or sandstorm, so it will harmful people safe and also influence the agriculture industrial. The last one is the monotherious people. Natural disaster caused by climate change can affect their water source and depleting them even more, as well as the industrial infrastructure where food is produced.
Mexico signed the UNFCCC in 1992 and ratified it in 1993. The convention came into force for Mexico on March 21, 1994. Mexico signed the Kyoto Protocol on June 9, 1998, but the Mexican Senator approved the Kyoto Protocol on April 29, 2000. Mexico is a developing country highly vulnerable to the effect of climate change. National emission of greenhouse gas represents only 1.4% of global emissions, and our net per capita emissions, inclusive of all sectors, are 5.9 tons CO2. Nevertheless, Mexico is the responsible party committed to tackling global climate change by transforming its development route to a low-emission pathway, which requires progressive decoupling of carbon emission from economic growth. The first national communication of Mexico was submitted to the UNFCCC in 1997. which provide an overall view of the national situation regarding the climate change studies that have been carried out. The second national communication of Mexico was submitted to UNFCCC in 2001. Mexico indicated that it favors initiating a process that would make it possible to explore new forms of cooperation focused on the long term. Mexico is a country committed to address climate change as demonstrated by the mitigation and adaptation action undertaken over the last few years in a systematic way and supported mainly with national resources. In the international area, Mexico has expressed its willingness to achieve a legally binding agreement with the participation of all parties in order to keep the global average atmospheric temperature below 2 degrees.
Mexico is one of the delegations present at the United Nations Climate Change Conference 2009 in Copenhagen. National mitigation actions of Mexico to be included in Appendix 2. One of the content is that Mexico aims at reducing its GHG emissions up to 30% with respect to the business as usual scenario by 2020. Provide the provision of a
Cancun Agreement. The Cancun Agreement took place in Cancun and was hosted by government of Mexico. The Cancun Agreement are a set of significant decisions by the international community to address the long-term challenge of climate change. Mexico government plays an important role to keep the negotiating process open and inclusive. Clean Development Mechanism. Mexico involved in a program in CDM called Small Hydropower Program. The energy demand in Mexico is continuously increasing in the recent years. The small hydropower reduced the fossil fuel use in Mexico. Mexico got involved in it to reduce carbon emissions.
I'm going to talking about the reason for engage in politics. First of all, Mexico have joined a lot of different organizations like UNFCCC, IPCC, and WCCF. Those are the organizations for saving the environment in the world. And Mexico can receive the market-based contribution while they join the organization because they will share the data. For example, like the greenhouse gas data and another fossil fuel data. They can compare with the others in order to save their local environments in the future. Mexico's climate policy can also be fixed because of the advice and the rules in the organization. They can save.
The proposal for the Mexico government to contribute for the climate change in the future is reduce 50% of emission by the year 2015. With respect to the year 2000, mandated by the LGCC, Mexico is a commitment to reduce unconditional 25% of its greenhouse gas and short-lived climate emission for the year 2013. This commitment implies a reduce of 22% of GHG and a reduce of 51% of carbon dioxide. Emission intensity per unit of GDP will reduce by around 40% from 2013 to 2030. The 25% reduced commitment expressed above could increase up to 40% in conditional manner. Subject a global agreement addressing important topics include international carbon price, carbon border adjustment, technical cooperation, access to low-cost financial resource, and technical transfer, all at the challenge of global climate change. With the same condition, GHG reduce could increase up to 36% and the black carbon reduced to 70% in 2013.
Our hope for the future is to have created a more sustainable country where there is no large worry about climate change. We hope to achieve this with less reliance on fossil fuel and more extensive renewable energy.
Our recommendation for Mexico is that Mexico should reduce fossil fuel and oil energy use. My recommendation for climate change should developing renewable energy and some other clean energy like sunshine, nuclear energy, wind and geothermal energy.
The Mexico government should also develop service industry like tourism, transportation, catering, and internet industry. The high energy consumption industry should be decreased, and government should improve the technology to reduce the energy use and carbon emission.